Welcome back in, everybody, to Birds 365, a Monday edition after the final preseason game. Joined now by Chris Franklin from NJ.com. Chris, welcome to the show, man. How you doing on this Monday morning?
Hey, it's doing great. It's just anxiously waiting to see which 53 guys are going to be on this roster, man. It's a good morning so far. How are you guys doing?
Doing well, Chris. Yeah, cut down day. Always an exciting day. Probably not for the 1,100 players that are going to be having some bad news, but a bunch of them are brought back on the practice squad. But initial 53, what were your most difficult decisions when you try to boil this thing down? Because I had some issues. I got to be honest, a little bit more than usual. I think it has to do with the liberalized roster rules. You got 16-man practice squad. You put veterans on there now. You got injured reserve. Before it used to be you were done for the season. Now you can bring two guys back. What were your most difficult spots to try to figure it out?
Well, definitely the wide receiver ones with John Ross and Johnny Wilson. What do you do with those guys? Because now they're hurt. Do you use both those return designations or IR for them, or do you try to hide somebody else? Well, overall, the wide receiver position was really tough. The defensive tackle position, surprisingly, we know that Milton Williams, Jordan Davis, Jalen Carter will be those guys, but when you look at Thomas Booker, he had a really good training camp. Yeah, PJ Mustipher, he flashed as well too. And then you got Marlon Tuipulotu. What do you do there? And then obviously cornerback. That's just good luck. I think that's where it's going to be extremely tough trying to figure out. I wouldn't be surprised if Howie's trying to deal a couple guys, trying to make sure he gets a late round pick for whoever he knows is not going to be on that 53-man roster. So those are three positions that are in the air and I think are still constantly evolving. I think there's a chance that maybe there's some guy on another roster that we may see on here as well too to shore up a couple of his other positions.
Well, yeah, you're always going to see one at least. Might be a waiver wire, might be a trade, might be something from that. Howie probably got his trading out with Dotson, but what do you think the Dotson trade? To me, it had more of an impact on Paris Campbell and John Ross than it did. I think it helped Anais Smith. What was your take on that?
Yeah, I think Anaya Smith, he helped himself a lot coming back from that. From coming back from that, and he was still trying to work his way back. He had, like to me, like he had some confidence issues just by his body
Oh yeah.
language. By the way, after that, so I think he started to help himself on that one. For Paris, this is going to come out really wrong. I don't mean it to come out wrong. But for John Ross, when he got into the concussion protocol, it was really tough, but it gave the Eagles an out to stash him away if they really, really wanted to. Paris Campbell, for me, I think you kind of need him because for at least for the first couple of weeks, which gives you the thing: do you put him on a practice squad, try to elevate him, or do you keep him on that roster? Because for me, I'd cut him out of the practice squad so you don't guarantee a contract, and then bring him up that way because Dotson's going to take some time to get used to this offense. And you still need somebody who can play on the outside and inside because you saw how much they've been using Devontae Smith and AJ Brown in the slot. So you need a guy who plays on that outside. So I think there's still a role for him in there, especially early on. And the worst case scenario, if you want to use him as your four, or you want to, if you do keep Ross and decide to bring back, and then you got a whole nother host of issues coming back, bringing him back on there. Oh,
Yeah.
so it's got to be fun being general manager. But I think Campbell still has a role on his team. I think, especially for his early part of the season.
You think
Yeah, I
Anaya?
think you got it right.
Yeah.
Real quick, Xander.
Yeah.
I think you got it right. Look, nobody was beating down his door in free agency. So he's got that prior history with Nick Sirianni. So he's a vested veteran. He doesn't have to go through waivers. And you can stick him in the hotel room and say, hey, Paris, we're bringing you back in 24 hours. And I think he'd be fine with it. So I think you do it that way, put him on the practice squad, elevate him maybe week 1, week 2. And then when Dotson is ready, you say, thank you for your service and move on at that point. I think that's how you manipulate the Paris Campbell situation.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I was like, yeah, and then you also get and you try and entice someone that was $21,000 versus what you're really making, but at least say, hey, at least you're getting some form of income if you want to add some stuff and get there because that's a good deal for those veterans now compared to that. So yeah, I think that's a possible. That's the way it should play it at least anyway.
What do you think they end up doing, Chris, at that linebacker position? That's another one I think is interesting. Oren Burks played all right in that preseason game here at the end. What do you think they do with that position?
See, I still think that I think there's a role. There would be a role for special teams because we right now. I think before last week, I didn't check the numbers going heading into after this game, but before last week, the Eagles were 31st in kickoff yards allowed. And it was really bad. 31 yards. I think third most, I believe. It was 31 yards they're giving up every kickoff. And Burks does really well with it. The problem is you can't let Van Sumeren go because you don't want to have a repeat of what happened with Christian Ellis last year, where you think, oh, I can sneak this guy through. And Van Sumeren was one of the among the team leaders in tackles this year. He was really a
Yeah.
tackling machine preseason. So you don't want to let a guy like that go because you really need him because you're letting Burks to help you out, but you're letting probably one of your better cover guys go. It's like, oh, great, here you go there. So I think you keep. Well, we know Devin White, Jeremiah Tryon Jr., Zach Bond, N'Kobe Dean. Not necessarily that order. Just those four guys are there. I can't see this team with all the outside edge rushers, quote unquote linebackers, going with six guys. So I think Burks is on the way out, which is rough, especially for a guy who played in the Super Bowl just a few months ago.
Yeah.
Like, hey, you played well. I guess the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. Sorry, you had to get hurt early training camp, but it's life.
Yeah, I mean, before training camp started, I almost had Oren Burks locked in, but he got hurt, and Ben played well. N'Kobe played well. Zach Bond proved he could play off-ball linebacker, at least in practice, and that's how quickly. I mean, injuries can really affect you. But he's an NFL player, no doubt about it. I'm glad you brought up Christian Ellis because I forgot to bring that up. Yeah, that's important to me as well when I made that decision because I put Ben on the roster, cut Oren Burks. And that was part of the reason. Christian Ellis. I'm like, they don't want to get bit again. Same thing, same position. So I'm glad you brought that up. That was a good pull by you. I think offensive line is another position when you look at the depth, Chris. That is, I was all over the place. I'm like, I want to keep Nick Gates. Do I keep Dylan McMahon? Brett Toth can play every position. Where are you on the backup offensive lineman?
You mean Captain Nick Gates?
Captain Nick Gates. Don't think I didn't notice that. I was immediately looking, Chris. Here tells you my twisted mind. I'm like, Nick Gates is out there. I immediately looked at the media guide. I'm like, is he from Minnesota or something? Because he didn't play for the Vikings. I'm like, why are they trotting him out there? And I came to the conclusion they want to keep him.
Saw that. Yeah, I saw it too. So like, he's going out like, he's out there. Okay, I thought Toth would go. I thought if anything, I thought Toth would go before Gates, but apparently if Gates goes out like that, so yeah, I think Gates makes his team. Scares me a little bit, but I think Gates makes his team, and we know and Toth is like the unofficial Stoutland child. He stays out, he leaves away, he comes back
Yeah, he's got a cot in the back of the locker room. He'll be back. He'll be back.
And then you just look and it's like if Fred Johnson's the other one. I'm trying to think. This seems the other one, so you go for it.
Keep Dylan McMahon.
I think you get away.
I think you could get him through waivers and on the practice squad, but how he doesn't like to cut his picks. Period.
Well, if you look at the what was it? Hard Knocks? I think it was. That unblurred image. The Giants, I think, there was some question about him. I think it was his size or whatever. So maybe some other teams think about that and then go, okay, yeah, we'll lay off of that. I mean, maybe depending on how well we saw Steen running a little bit during the last open practice that we were able to see. So it makes me think like they won't use the IR spot on that. So I think he comes back. You're going to have to let him go through and see if you can get it that way. That's why I think you keep Toth, who we saw at the second team center a lot, who in my opinion proved a lot as a center with after all those snaps last year. It's like, oof, that's what that. So I think you see him because he can fill in there, and then you just go, please, Cam Jurgens, don't get hurt. Because if they do, it's going to be oof. on that one. So I think you'll see that. I see that happen, and they try to sneak McMahon back on, which a lot of teams keep their own guys anyway. Nobody really reaches out and calls.
Yeah, waivers is overrated to begin with. There'll be about 35 to 40 guys claimed league wide, and if you claim more than 3 or 4 players, that just means you're a really bad football team. So get ready for that, Mike K in Carolina. Your old buddy Mike K.
And the problem is that if you have a team that continues to, like, I know first priority, waiver priority is important, but the fact that if you have to get so many guys off waivers, to me, it's an indictment on your own scouting
Oh
staff. If you
yeah,
have to
it's
keep going that much,
awful.
like,
It's like
hey,
you got
sorry,
your own
guys.
players you want to work with. I think fans don't understand that. Most teams have their own young players. They've been working through the spring and summer with them, and you're bringing a guy who's done nothing with you. Doesn't make sense. If you have any value in your own teaching and personnel process, it's a really bad sign if you pick up a bunch of players on waivers. Now, if you claim 1 or even 2, GMs like to do stuff. They're bored. They like to do stuff. So they might churn some guy at the back end of the rod. That's fine. But there's always one team, it seems, that claims like 4 or 5 guys. That is a disastrous foreshadowing of what's going on with that particular organization.
And I think when you look at it, it's also, I didn't interrupt, but
No,
when you
go
look
ahead.
at it, is kick return, like if it's a kick return or some ancillary position where you think, okay, there's this guy who has a specific skill that we are missing in the lack of roster, that we don't have to overpay later on or pay for a veteran that pay that much to get him on cheap. You try something like that. I.e. Jason Huntley, which that didn't work out, but still Jason Huntley, something like that one, you can see that use that. But other than that, yeah, good luck trying to find somebody that fits in the system, works well, and you keep going that way, and turns out to be really good.
Yeah. Jason Huntley. Good pull. Yeah. He could run.
He was fast. Thought he was going to be the Forrest Gump guy. Like, you saw him moving around in college, like, okay, yeah, give him that. Next thing you know, it's like, not even on the outside zone, huh? Okay, here we go. See ya.
Tight ends. I only got 2. I can't keep EJ. But now, don't get me wrong. I mean, Kellen Moore likes to play 12 personnel. They're going to have 3 tight ends. And if you add the practice squad, you're going to have maybe 4 or 5. But the third tight end on the 53, I think that might even be Jack Stoll if the Giants release him, as some have speculated. But it might come from outside the organization. Where are you at tight end, or do you like EJ Jenkins? Where's
I
Albert
like.
O? Howie's love affair with Albert O. Does that continue?
You can go at 3 ways. Personally, I like EJ Jenkins in that role. I really do. I mean, if Stoll does come available, it makes sense because you can use him as an H-back type guy. Like he can be your blocking guy again, but they can also use him as an H-back in certain situations, which Kellen Moore has used in the past. And that makes sense. EJ Jenkins, to me, I like his game. I like he can be a factor. I know you already have Calcaterra to be that another receiver, but I think you could be, if you go like say 13 for this in the goal line, he gives you another option down there, and I like that as well too. Albert O, I think, would only stay because how he spent the draft pick on him, but we really haven't truly seen him make an impact overall. And I like the guy, but when you look at the on the field stuff, there hasn't truly been that moment where you go, you know what? Look at this play he made. He deserves to be on this roster, and he really stood out. And that's rough to say because I thought he would stick around early on, but yeah, I think EJ Jenkins is that's a guy I probably would look at the third. But if Stoll does come available, you have to think very long about that, very very long about that to see if you want to add him on there. But
Yeah,
yeah,
Albert is strange. So the Eagles gave up. Really was just draft positioning because they
right.
got Guegbanon along with the 7th round pick for a 6th round pick. So they just gave up draft positioning from that 6th round pick to the 7th round pick. And yet, I mean, I like Albert too. I mean, what's not to like as a person? And if you look at him, He's like 6'5", 260, runs a 4.49. You go, hey, maybe we got something here. But he's never on the field. When he is on the field, he's not effective.
Right.
I mean, at some point, Howie's got to say, all right, I got to move on. I believe we're at that point, Chris, but
Yeah.
if we aren't, it wouldn't shock me. There's something about that guy that Howie likes. It seems.
It's the side. It's between. I think it's a trait when you look at the tight end position, or that I like to call it the tweeners. He either gets like really big wide receiver. Let's see, really likes really big
It
wide
does. It
receivers
does.
that can go to the tight ends, or then tight ends who are really big that are versatile that you really use down in the red zone. And he
Or
fits both of them.
quarterback. The Rodgers kid was a quarterback in college, like Tyree Jackson.
Yep.
He does that a lot too.
Another guy who you thought would be that, and he's hurt again with the Giants. They had to waive him. They had to waive him, so it was rough time for those big guys down there and those big tight ends. Rough times for them.
Yeah. Yep. Anything else? Anything else trouble? Did you mention defensive tackle Thomas Booker? I think a lot of people. So here's how I went at it at defensive tackle. I think Thomas Booker played the best. If you look at the three guys, Marlon Tuipulotu, because Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis, Milton Williams, Moro Ajomo, I think have made the football team. So it comes down to that fifth spot. You got Marlon T. You got Thomas Booker, PJ Mustipher. I think Thomas Booker played the best in the preseason in camp, but he's not a nose tackle. You already got Moro, Milton. All those guys can handle the 3 technique, the 4-eye stuff. You need a backup for Jordan Davis. So to me, it comes down to Marlon or PJ, and I got to go Marlon. What does Chris Franklin go?
See, I go PJ. I look at him because I know Marlon's played there. It's been around for a while. I know he has flashes, has moments, but I look at PJ and what he could become. I think he could still take up 2 blocks just because he can shoot the gaps really well. I like the way he goes in between that A gap. He can shoot it that way too, and I think he can draw 2 guys to him. And I think that's, especially in this defense, that's key on terms of that. The one thing I think I like Book a lot, and I thought in terms of both one off field again, I looked at that. You're right. They would be really light if you put him. You'd have to move either Milton Williams or Jalen Carter at that nose tackle, or just give up that odd man, that 5-man line look completely. Because if Jordan Davis is gone, teams are just going to say, you know what, we'll just run down your throat and just play ball control on top of that. It's tough. It's just the way everything works around. I think it's more Mustipher. I personally think Mustipher over Marlon. I think you can get Marlon back on the practice squad. I think you'd be able to do that. But also, once again, I look at that and Booker. I think somebody might take a chance on Booker. I think he not be here in terms of a defensive line help.
Sometimes you got to lose a player. I mean, sometimes you are going to lose a player, but I don't think it's worth gambling at that. There's some guys you want to gamble with and some guys you don't want to gamble with. I can gamble with Thomas Booker, and if I lose, I can live with it. I can live with it. You never like to lose a player you want to get back, but there's certain guys like Eli Ricks is a guy who bit me last year because I'm like, well, Chris, you're there every day, and Mekhi Gardner outplayed him on a day-to-day basis. Mekhi was a better special teams player. You're never going to play that late. This was before the season. They got 77 injuries at the cornerback position, and everybody played. But you're thinking that he's not going to play. So why not keep the guy who's going to help you? But the Eagles were worried about coverage, and he's a good coverage. He's got good natural coverage skills, and that's more valuable than the opposite. So when I was down, I'm keeping 6 corners, and to me, it came down to Eli Ricks versus Josh Jobe. I think the Eagles will keep Eli Ricks because they're more concerned about losing him to waivers than Josh Jobe. I think they know they can get Josh through waivers, elevate him, he plays on special teams. Eli Ricks is inactive, or am I overthinking it?
Yeah, I think Ricks is one of the guys they probably try and trade. That's
Well,
the
they might try to
that's
trade him as
Yeah.
that's
well.
the one I tried to think. I'm worried about that because also when you look at Joe's and it's a little special teams thing, but especially that one too. I think Joe adds a little bit more value in terms of he can line up and be more of an impact, especially stopping those gunners on the on a punt coverage team as well too. Is there, I should have I forget keep forgetting to post it, but there's one thing and I like special teams a lot, like watching the little ins and outs. The way that he affects those gunners on the outside, almost like bullies them, pushes out of bounds, but bullies them, say, I dare you to come back in. Him and McPherson work on that outside. I wanted to put the clip, especially against the Ravens. There's a clip I would forget, keep getting the post. But I was like, yeah, that's a skill you need because field position wise, everything else, like, sorry, punt return cover, sorry. And I'm looking at that like, okay, I see a guy like that. You need every little nook and cranny you can get on that too. I think special teams wise, that's why I give him the edge over that because I think he's more impactful in that aspect of the game.
Oh, he's
And it could be
definitely
a core
better at
guy.
special teams.
Yeah.
Definitely. It's not even close as a special. He's a very good special teams player. But
And then,
I think the Eagles, and remember, Zach's a very good special teams player as well.
yeah.
And unfortunately, Zach the numbers game is too difficult for him at this stage. But so is Ringo. Ringo's really good on special teams. So the Eagles have some wiggle room there. But yeah, I remember back to last year, and I'm like, they don't care about poor Michael Clay. They're going to keep the
Yeah.
guy they think has an upside. Now, if they trade him, and that helps alleviate it. I don't think they want to cut him though. If they can't trade him, maybe I'm wrong. Wouldn't
I
be the
feel bad.
first time.
I feel that that point about Michael Clay is really good because it's almost like how they say the head coach, some of the head coaches want full personnel control and they want to pick the parcels line, picking the groceries. Well, if they're picking the groceries, Michael Clay is like on Food Network's Chopped. Like, here's
Oh
the
yeah,
most random thing: like make a Michelin star meal with the rest of these players that we have on. Good luck.
yeah,
He tries to do that. It's a rough thing to be a special teams coach when you're looking like, all right, now if I make do with what we have here on that. But yeah, it's
yeah.
a really good
Well,
point.
Ellis, going back to Christian Ellis, perfect example. He was really good special teams player, arguably the best special teams player on the team. Eagles are trying to sneak him through waivers. Um, all right, make
Yeah.
do, Michael Clay.
It's rough out there. It is rough out there, especially. But yeah, it's tough. It's I would not want to be Howie. This is like, well, Howie would love this because this is his
Oh,
time. Like I
he
said
loves it.
too. But
This is his time, man. He
this is a
loves it.
rough thing.
I'm gonna hit
It
this
is.
super chat, guys. Ask you both about this. Jason A Team checks in, gives us $5. He says Bradberry is the weirdest roster spot I've ever seen. It just doesn't make any sense any way you look at it. Seems like they backed in a hole with him. Chris, I'll start with you. What's your takeaway on Bradberry and where he is on this roster?
Well, I think it's tough. Like you can't because everybody sees the contract number from other teams, and if they want to trade for him, I think it's just tough to move him. They could try to justify it on that one too, especially with the position switch going from cornerback to safety, and they're saying, okay, you got a new time safety moving that way as well too. So you might as well have somebody who could step if something were to happen. At least he can filter down in and play in that box area, and he can do that. But then, like we were mentioned before, we're going to have to see him play somewhere else as well too to justify that roster spot. And I've never seen him line up with special teams myself. I haven't seen it personally, so it's a weird fit. Do I think he can still be a contributor? Yeah. If you want to go big nickel, have him play around that corner spot and play near the flat, curl the hook area. Yeah, I think he can do that. But it it does look if you're not using the corners for money you're paying him, it is weird having him there.
Yeah, it is. But on to counter that, do you see any way that Howie kicks the can down the road with James Bradberry as long as he has, and then wakes up tomorrow morning and says, "You know what? I give up. I'm going to cut
Yeah.
him."
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, it's tough to vision
I
how he
can't do
admitting
it.
defeat like that.
Yeah. To me, I can't see him doing it. Maybe he does, but I can't see him doing it. So until he gets traded, he's here from my perspective. And we'll see. That certainly is an interesting one. At C. Franklin News, Make sure you follow Chris on the X platform. NJ.com does a tremendous job covering the Eagles and the NFL there. We always try to get you on post game, Chris. So I have to ask you about the game. Anything about the game? You take anything from the game other than why the hell is Nolan Smith out there?
Why was Nolan Smith out there? Why were challenge flags thrown in the second half of that game? Why did they decide to experiment with this? I know why they decided to experiment with the 6-man officiating crew, but it was still tough to watch when you had offsides for me on that one too. Why were they? Why were they charging $45 for parking for the third preseason game? Why is it the fact that we had to see so many guys that there was more guys that were not dressed than were actually
I
dressed?
counted the number, Chris. The number of guys weren't dressed, 84, 42 per side. Almost an entire NFL team was not dressed per side.
That I as much Goodell has a point about wanting he because I remember that appearance being McAfee saying he hates preseason games, he wants to see him go 18-2. I get it. Maybe just have an extra joint practice and you just say, you know what, that's it. And you just that preseason is really it's just really tough to watch. All the teams love the joint practices anyway. Give them say, hey, you get 2 preseason games. The owners won't like it because it means less revenue for an extra game.
Well, you hit the nail on the head with the $45 parking. I mean, they can't charge $45 for the joint practice parking.
Like have the joint practice be the thing. Like it's just like, hey, you know what? Just don't outright say, hey, this is a full out on and on game because everybody knows it's not. I mean, it's a good. I like it in the chance that it gives families that may not have a chance to go see a game or see the players up close, what have you. Yeah. But the fact you charge full price like it's a regular game,
it's awful. It's awful. And they bundle it together with the season ticket holders, so they have to pay for it. And how many people are there? Probably 50,000 people for an Eagles game. I would say maybe less.
Doing away, you see the spots. It looked like me before I had I go bald. You saw the patches. It's like, okay, it's going that way too. It looked like that. There are patches in that stadium on that one too. It was bad.
But Chris, to Nick's point about challenge, you got to practice everything, Chris. You got to practice the operation, the communication, all that bullshit. That's what
you can do that. You can do that when nobody's around.
Yeah,
well, and you can pump the crowd noise like Doug did. Like when Doug did in 2020 when we were down in the stadium, and they pumped it, and you barely could hear. My ears were ringing for like the next day or whatever because it was only us, the only media and the team.
Oh God, that was awful.
Doug just kept
and
going.
They had the speaker right behind us.
Yep.
Oh, that was that was they were trying to get us at that point. Yeah,
that's your operational wise. You can do that there. You don't have to have a game at top of that.
Yeah, that was cruel, Doug. By the way, you're listening, Doug Peterson. That was cruel.
That was fun.
Yeah. How you do anything is how you do everything. They left it out there on the preseason game with the flags and the challenges and everything. Chris, we appreciate you joining the show, man. Good breakdown of the 53-man roster and the preseason game. We appreciate you being here. We'll talk to you soon. All right, Chris?
Yeah.
Sounds great. Thank you guys for having me on. Y'all have a good one now.
Yeah. Thanks, Chris.
There's Chris Franklin joining us on Birds 365. Good stuff from Chris Franklin there. Just 4 minutes left to go here on Birds 365. Great crowd in here right now. Johnny Mac, appreciate everybody being here. Make sure you guys hit that like button. I wanted to try and get at least 150. I think we're going to come up a little short, but appreciate all you guys for being here. Johnny Mac, any closing thoughts on today's Monday edition of Birds 365? We are close, John. We are officially done with like the pre-regular season work. There's some stuff the Eagles are going to do.
Well,
we're done covering camp in terms of how much access you have. The preseason games are behind us. It's right there in front of us now, Johnny Mac.
Yeah, and once you get down to the 53 and the guys, that are going to be here and a 16-man practice squad as well. So next couple of days are very important. I think we hit most of the positions that needed to be hit. A lot of tough decisions. Not easy this year trying to project the 53. And a lot of moving parts because Howie is certainly on the phone right now trying to do some different things, trying to probably trade some players. Mention, Bradberry's obvious. Eli Ricks has been mentioned. a player like that, you know, can you find a way to keep a player like Oren Burks, who I don't think you want to lose, but you want to risk going through Christian Ellis part 2 with Ben Van Sumeren. Very, very difficult decision there at linebacker, corner, safety with Caden Stearns and his injury. That complicates things. Tristan McCullum, defensive front. Good discussion about the defensive tackles. The final spot there with Marlon T, Thomas Booker, PJ Mustipher. That's a really good competition. Patrick Johnson. I think everybody's kind of settled on Patrick Johnson making this football team. So if he doesn't, that would be a big surprise to everybody. Nick Yates is interesting, as Chris mentioned. Very savvy. Sees him coming out as a captain. Same as me. It says, what the hell? Nick Yates? Because he just got here. You know, he hasn't been here for a long time. But he started almost 40 NFL games. And again, with some of that uncertainty with the health of Mekhi Becton and Tyler Steen, maybe they need him early because Matt Hennessy did not do well this summer, got hurt. Max Sharping had a good game against Minnesota, but hasn't been spectacular overall. So maybe they wanted to keep one of them, and maybe it's Nick Gates, but we'll see how that shakes out. And then obviously the Dotson trade, I think, if anything, clarified wide receiver for me more than opened up questions.
Yeah, I think some people were speculating that Anais would be on the outs and they would keep Paris Campbell, but I'm more side with how you went there. Johnny Mac, when do you think we'll learn a little bit more? I know it's tomorrow at 4, but you think we're going to start to hear them cutting players today?
Yeah, I think they'll cut a few today. They usually cut a group to day. It'll be Monday and Tuesday. So they'll probably cut, I guess, in 10 guys, somewhere in that range, and then make the rest of them at the last moment. But you'll see some agents leaking out some names that guys have been informed they're cut. So there'll be some names leaking out.
Good stuff, Johnny Mac. What else is on the agenda this week? It's the last week, and then we go into Labor Day weekend. So we'll have off next Monday with no shows on Labor Day, and then boom, we're right there, Johnny Mac. I mean, the season's going to start that Friday, so we're
close,
and
the Eagles are obviously going to Brazil, so I'm going to be working on Monday. I think. Well, we don't have the schedule yet, but Labor Day screws it up. The Brazil thing screws it up. So right now, and this is tentative, they're going to be back on the practice field Wednesday and Thursday this week, at least. And I think one of them may be at Lincoln Financial Field, but not sure about that yet. Obviously, Howie will talk to us after the cuts on Tuesday. So that'll be a little bit after 4. When that comes down, and yeah, then you're off and running. But remember, they're paying on Labor Day week that you're talking. They're playing on Friday. They're leaving on Wednesday, so they're going to be practicing Sunday and Monday, probably. Again, nothing's locked in, but probably for the hinky week schedule.
We'll double check on the Monday show of next week. Maybe we'll do like an hour, John, or some sort of abbreviated show, because I do think we got to get everybody ready for the Friday game. But we'll see how it all plays out. John, good show today. I thought our guests were great, Jeff Kerr and Chris Franklin. Let's see what happens with this roster, man. We'll see. I think you're going to get the win, Johnny Mac. That's my prediction.
Yeah, I you shoot your shot. Nick Gates is one of my shots. James Bradberry being here. So that's what happens. If you get 2 guys wrong like that, you're sunk. But you got to shoot your shot.
Got to shoot it, and Johnny Mac did. So we'll see what ends up happening. I want to thank everybody for being here. Almost 140 likes. So appreciate everybody. Hit that like button on your way out if you enjoyed the show today. Johnny Mac, good stuff, man. We'll talk to you tomorrow morning. All right, brother?
All right, everybody, enjoy it. Yeah, keep an eye out. Cuts will likely start today.
They might start dropping right when we get out of here, John, like they normally do after the 10 a.m. news.
Let's
after
check
the 10
real
a.m.
quick. Nothing yet. So, but yeah, yeah. Keep an eye. Keep an eye
Got
out
it.
today.
Good stuff, Johnny Mac. We'll see you. We'll talk to you tomorrow morning on Birds 365. All right, brother?
All right. Thanks, everybody.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Hit that like button on your way out. We'll catch you tomorrow morning.